good morning, everybody. I'm an attorney here in South Florida. It's a pleasure to be with you all. My name is Rami Jurado. I'm with the law firm of Jurado and Associates. We are a firm that does various areas of law. For example, real estate law, we deal with that a lot, litigation, probate, state planning, immigration, and trademarks, copyrights, all of the intellectual property stuff, we deal with that as well. And we have an affiliated CPA firm. It's called Quilca CPA Group, so they can assist you with taxes and everything else, and it's run by my husband. It's a pleasure to be with you guys today. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to start by sharing my presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and I hope that it comes out well so I can send everybody a copy of the presentation along with the recording. I like to make these presentations interactive, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A or in the chat, and I will answer as I go. Thank you again. Okay, perfect. I think everybody can see it there. Again, our firm is called Jurado and Associates, and you can see the areas of law that we practice. We have 3 investment visas that I'm going to talk about. Those are the L1 visa, the E2 visa, and the EB5 visas. All these visas can be used for real estate related purposes, and I'll give you real life examples of how my clients have actually used them. Okay, so to start, clients are going to need you guys to help them in obtaining these visas and also some real estate work in between. For example, if they're going to do any business to apply for an investment visa, they're going to need a workspace, right? They're going to need an office, a commercial office, a warehouse, whatever it is, and you guys can help them obtain it. They could either buy it or rent it. So that's the first thing that they're going to need. They're going to need actual workspace. That workspace, whether it's an office or a warehouse, it's going to have all of the licenses and permits in order to be able to develop whatever business it is that you're going to be developing. Our firm here, we help everybody obtain different licenses and permits depending on the business that they're going to do, and we can help them do that. Then they're going to need a place to live. In my experience, when they come in to apply for the investment visa, their family, and then as soon as they get their visa approved, the first thing they do is buy property because now they want to reside there. And again, you can help them find that temporary space, and you could also help them find that property to buy once they obtain their visa. Also, the businesses, as I will mention as we go through each visa, can be buying and selling real estate, can be remodeling real estate, can be managing real estate, can be developing real estate, and we're going to talk about all of that in a bit. Also, you guys, as realtors in the state of Florida, you are allowed to help somebody buy a business. You don't need a special business broker license to help somebody buy a business. In our firm, we assist in doing the business closings for all types of businesses. So you, as a realtor in your MLS, you're able to look at business opportunities. You can find a business opportunities and show it to your client. Your client can buy it and then obtain either an E2 visa, an L1 visa, or an EB5 visa because of that business opportunity. Okay, so far I've told you a couple of ways that you as realtors are involved. One is they need workspace, either to buy or to rent. 2 is they need a place to live, first to rent and then to buy. Also, the business itself that is going to give them the visa can be with real estate, either buying and selling real estate, managing real estate, even opening up a whole brokerage account, real estate brokerage account, developing lots, all of that can happen. And then lastly, you guys as licensed real estate agents can show them business opportunities by using your MLS. And we can talk about that further in another class, and I can show you how to use it because it's really an advantage to be able to show your clients not just properties, but businesses as well. All right, any questions again in the Q&A? And I do see a couple of questions, so let me see. Can you send us a copy of your slides? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to send everybody a follow-up email probably tomorrow with a copy of the recording and a copy of my slides. All right, somebody's asking me a question in Spanish. I'll translate it to English. In an investment, can you buy a business for $600,000? Can various families or partners obtain the benefits of an E2? Yes. You could actually do, and I haven't spoken about E2s yet, but in E2 visas, you're allowed to have 2 investors. Okay, so if each investor is from the same country, they're each able to own 50-50 of that business. And then through something called negative control, through immigration laws, you are able to obtain 2 E2 visas. Now, you can have more than E2 visas if you have 2 people come in as investors and then the rest come in as employees, and they're all from the same country, and I'll explain that further. But to answer your question, Alexandra, yes, you can. All right, so somebody, Jack, wants to share. Oh, Jack, thank you so much. He's an existing client. He says, you showed me a pathway to get the E2 visa with real estate, integrated engineering background, and this seminar will enable me to provide you leads. You can always use me as an example. Thank you, Jack. I will use you as an example. It was a pleasure working with you. All right, so let's start with the L1 visa. The L1 visa is not as popular. I don't know why. Not a lot of people talk about it, but it's really a fabulous visa because it allows a foreigner who is working at a company outside of the United States to come to the United States to expand that company, right? Now, the issue is, or where my clients face a little bit of uncertainty, is that in the United States, that company needs to have at least 8 employees, is what we usually recommend, and half of them professional in order for them to qualify for an E2B, an L1 visa. So the first requirement is the person that's coming in, the investor, has to have worked for 1 year out of the past 3 years in a foreign company. Then that company decides to open up a subsidiary, an affiliate, a related company in the United States. It does not have to be in the same industry. It could be in total different industries. In the company abroad, I recommend to have at least 8 or 10 employees, half of them professional. And in the company in the United States, before we apply for the L1 visa, I also recommend to have minimum 8 or 10 employees or more, and half of them professional. Now, professional for immigration purposes does not mean a US degree. You can have a professional that has a foreign degree and we can still count them in as professionals. This visa was actually created to allow foreign businesses to expand markets into the United States and then to transfer employees. So the person that's being sent to the United States does not necessarily have to be the owner. It could be just an employee. But they have to have either an executive, managerial, or be an employee with specialized knowledge. So for immigration purposes, first, we establish the relationship between the foreign company and the US company. And that's something that I will do through forming the company in the United States and establishing that corporate relationship, either as a parent, subsidiary, affiliate, or branch. Then we have to prove that this employee that we want to send has worked for 1 year out of the past 3 years in the company abroad. And that we prove through payroll in their country and all of that. Lastly, we have to show that this employee either is an executive, a manager, or somebody with specialized knowledge. So an executive is somebody that oversees other employees, and some of them are professional. So that is why it's so important to have abroad at least some employees that are professional. A manager can be somebody that manages a particular function, such as the marketing function, the sales function, all of that, we can show that as well. And an employee with specialized knowledge is somebody that knows something so well about your company abroad that you need him in the United States or her in order to develop that same business. Now, with the L1 visa, it does not have to be in the same industry. I have done L1 visas with my team where abroad we had a law firm, right? And the attorney was coming over, but he in the United States bought a coin laundry. Abroad, we had a law firm again, I'm very famous with lawyers, and here he established a daycare, like a daycare center, you know? So it doesn't matter that it's different industries. Abroad, you can be selling shoes, and then here you started a restaurant. What matters is that corporate relationship between the foreign company and the US company. And again, that's something that we create. And any country would qualify for this visa. There's no requirement of you have to be from a particular country. All countries will qualify. So let's see, I think I have a couple of more questions. If anyone is having a process with immigration, can this person file out or ask for another visa? That is very case specific. So we would have to see what immigration process they have right now, and then see if they can be qualified to transfer to another one. For example, we've helped a lot of people that are here with pending asylum apply for a labor certification, right? Because they were here with pending asylum, and then they started working for somebody, and that company wants to sponsor them as an employee, and then we're able to do that for them. They're able to transfer from pending asylum to labor certification, which in fact gives them residency. That's something that we can do. So it just depends on what process they're in right now to what they want to transfer. For example, I have people that are here on a student visa, and then they decide to apply for an E2 visa, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and we're able to do the transfer. So it just depends on the particular process. Let's see, I have more questions here. Okay, not yet. So going back to the L1 visa, the employer must have sufficient physical premises to house a new office. This is a very important requirement. What does that mean? If we're having a business in the United States, we need to show we have a warehouse, we need to show we have an office, or If it's a restaurant, even, we have to show that there's an office area within the restaurant. If it's a store and you're selling shoes, you actually have to show that there is an office within that shoe store to sell, or you can rent another office. Because what we want to show is that we're bringing the executive or manager and that they're going to have sufficient physical premises to do the work. That is why it's so important to have employees in the United States and half of them, or at least 4 or 5 of them, professional, because this is not a visa to bring somebody to be doing the work directly, such as an administrative assistant, a receptionist. It's not. This is a visa to bring an executive, a manager, somebody that oversees other employees, and then those other employees may oversee other employees who actually do the day-to-day work. Also, we have to show that you're going to qualify for that here in the United States. We have to show that you qualify for that abroad. That is why we prepare. There's going to be basically a business plan that's going to have 5-year projections, that's going to have a diagram showing basically an organizational chart, what your position was abroad, that you were an executive, a manager, or somebody with specialized knowledge, and what your position will be here, whether you're an executive or manager, or somebody with specialized knowledge. That business plan has to be a realistic one. We actually work with a CPA firm to do it, and they can do it, they can prepare it, and they can present it to immigration so that it's all realistic. Because remember, your L1 visa is going to be approved. Your end goal might be to become a resident, but if if your business plan is not realistic, you're not going to be able to fulfill it. And then we're going to face some issues when it comes to renewal or when it comes to applying for residency. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Also, the U.S. office needs to support the executive or managerial position within 1 year of the approval of the petition. That is why we want to show that there is sufficient investment made. We want to show that there is an actual physical office and that you do have employees. Now, if you're asking me how much is the investment required, well, that depends. Are you going, for example, I had a client that for an L1 visa, they bought a plot of land and they were going to develop townhouses. Of course, the investment for that, they were developing a construction company, was, over $1 million. Now, if you're just going to come in and develop a daycare or buy an existing daycare, that might only be $300,000. If you're going to come in and start a chain of hotels, then that might be millions of dollars. If you're going to come in here to just start with one multifamily housing, maybe 2 or 3, then that might be less. So the amount of investment highly depends on the type of business that you're going to develop or purchase. I think everybody can see my screen. If you can't, please let me know. All right. Continuing about the L1 visa. So usually the way the L1 visa works is that you can, once you apply, you get approved for 1 year, and then we can do a renewal 3 months before the year expires, and then you would be usually approved for two more years at a time. It just depends, 1 year to 2 years. But what most of my clients do is that as soon as the 1 year is over, we do the renewal, and then we apply for residency, for the EB1. Because for the EB1, we have to show that you have basically that you worked abroad for 1 year out of the past 3 years, that you came to the United States and that you work in the United States also for 1 year, and then we can apply for residency. If you don't apply for residency and you stay on an L1, then the maximum you can stay on it is 7 years. However, most of my clients end up applying for residency. And of course, an L1 visa, it's going to give you L1 visa for you, L2 visa for your spouse and your minor children under 21. And then when you apply for residency, everybody's going to be included in that residency application. And then after that, everybody can become a citizen. Okay, I want to make sure that everybody's hearing me because I see there was an issue with the audio, but I think we're back now. Let me continue. So basically, the L1 visa is a great visa for those of you or your clients that have a company abroad or work for a company abroad, and then that company wants to establish a subsidiary here, and then they want to apply for residency eventually. It's not a right-away residency. You have to have worked abroad for 1 year out of the past 3 years and work here for 1 year out of the recent years, and then you'll be able to apply for EB1 and residency. The investment amount, I mean, it depends, but it could be as little as $200,000, $300,000. Any real estate business will qualify, okay? I wanna be really clear with that. As long as that business needs to create employment, at least 8 jobs on payroll and half of them professional. So for example, things that we have actually done is developing plot of land, as I mentioned, building warehouses, buying also maybe buying 10 apartments and managing them through Airbnb or something related to that, where you need, different people to do different things. I have clients that have bought hotels, clients that bought shopping centers, clients that bought various houses in Orlando to manage them for rentals, short-term rentals or vacation rentals. Let's see what else. All of those things have worked for an L1 visa. What matters is that that business requires the creation of employment and that half of them, or at least, 4 or 5 of them are professionals. If you're able to do that, then you can use real estate. Other than that, you can use any business that, again, requires the creation of employment. So one thing people get confused is, what if I'm buying or I'm showing my client a business and it only has 3 employees? Can we still do the L1 visa? Yes, because we can say that you will create those jobs, right? So you're buying, let's say, a daycare that only has 3 employees, but your client's plan is to expand it, to create more programs, to hire more teachers, to do more things, then you will end up with the required number of jobs. So just because a business doesn't have it, it doesn't mean it cannot be done through the business plan and through projections, as long as the client understands. Same thing, for example, I have clients that buy hair salons. And they tell me, Rumi, everybody is an independent contractor. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But if you want to apply for a visa, let's say I need to visa, we need to put some of them on payroll, and then they're able to develop that. Or I have clients that say, I want to apply for an L1 with a hair salon. What can I do? Well, maybe don't just acquire 1 hair salon. Maybe you want to acquire 3 of them, right? Put the hairstylist on payroll, and then maybe have 1 marketing manager for all of them, maybe have another district manager, maybe have an executive assistant, things like that has a college degree, so that you can put them all as professionals and you can structure this. Basically, it's like an organizational chart, putting the executive or manager here, and then the professionals here, and then whoever else on the bottom. So just because the business doesn't qualify with the number of employees or that they're professional, it doesn't mean it doesn't qualify, or it won't, as long as we do some restructuring before applying for the visa. And we have done that a lot. Okay. Let's keep going. E2 visa. Okay, so the E2 visa is a great visa. It's actually one where Jag was mentioning. We helped them with that. And it's a really fabulous visa. The sad thing is that not all countries qualify. So when I send you my follow-up email, I'll include a link that you can see all of the countries that qualify. Now, a lot of the European countries have a treaty with the United States. There's either a navigational or commerce treaty, so they'll qualify. Canada has a treaty with the United States. Some of the South American countries have a treaty also that make them qualify, such as Colombia, Chile, Argentina. And then sometimes we have people that are from a country that doesn't have a treaty, but then because of their citizenship in another country, they qualify. For example, I've done a lot of E2 visas for Venezuelans, but Venezuela doesn't have a treaty. However, whoever applied had dual nationality and had Italian citizenship. I have done some E2 visas for Peruvian, that's actually where I'm from. And sadly, Peru doesn't have a treaty, but they were able to obtain Colombian citizenship and then be able to apply for an E2 visa. Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica, they all have a treaty, Mexico. And for example, Nicaraguans don't have a treaty, but if they're able to obtain Honduran citizenship, now they have a treaty and they're able to apply for an E2 visa, even if they never lived in that country, as long as they have a passport. And only 1 family member needs to qualify. I do a lot of cases where the husband is the one that has the nationality of the treaty country, the kids and the spouse don't, but that's okay. They're all going to be included because the husband has the nationality. So just 1 of them needs to qualify. All right, so this is a non-immigrant visa. Here we don't have a direct path to residency. However, I will discuss some specific examples where E2 visa clients have been able to apply for residency, not because of their E2, but somehow related to it, and I'll discuss in a minute. So it is a non-immigrant visa. When you apply, you have to have non-immigrant intent. You don't intend to reside here permanently. That's when you apply. But your intent can change as you start living here, right? So when you apply, you don't have intent to live here, but reside here forever. But then later your intent changes because you see how fabulous the United States is. That is a possibility. The minimum investment amount that we recommend is $100,000. However, I have done E2 visas with less amount. In my personal experience, the European countries are let's say, more lenient toward less investment amount. The South American countries, not so much. So, because the E2 visas, they get adjudicated at different consulates, right? So it's not, well, you could also do a status change, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the way that the E2 visa works is we will apply at the consulate of the country that you're from, and they will then give you an interview date, and you will go there for the interview once we have submitted all of the documentation of the business plan, all of that, right? But each consulate has their own adjudication requirements and the way that they look at things. That's why I'm telling you, in the European countries, you might get away with a lower investment amount. In the South American countries or Central American, not so much. So what are the basic requirements? First, the person must be a national of the treaty country, not a resident, a national. You need a passport of the treaty country, and I will send you an email with the link of all of the treaty countries. Then immigration says that there has to be a substantial amount invested. What is that amount? It depends on the business that you're doing. If you're telling me that you're going to buy a small cafeteria, then maybe $80,000, $100,000 is enough. Whatever you pay the attorneys, that's included in the investment amount. Whatever you pay the CPA for the business plan, that's included in the investment amount. So let's say you bought a little cafeteria for $80,000, you pay the attorneys, you pay the CPA, you paid all the costs, and you are $100,000, that should be okay. Now, if you're telling me you're gonna open up a chain of 5-star restaurants, then of course, 80,000 is not gonna be enough. Now we're looking at more money invested. So it just depends on the type of business that you're going to be doing. I have clients that open up management companies, right? So they'll manage properties for others, and that's fine. You can do that. We've done that for E2 visas. I have clients like Jack that we did something, it was like a brokerage together mixed with timeshares management, and it worked for real estate, because we showed that there was actually money invested, jobs were created, he was of the treaty country, and then boom, you have an E2 visa. I have clients that bought plots of lands again and do development in that land, and that, of course, the amount of investment is higher. I have clients that bought shopping centers, and the investment amount is, of course, higher as well. Also, the foreigner has to have the intent to develop and direct the investment. So this is very important. My personal experience, even though immigration says you need at least 50%, I like to show at least 51% or more. I want there to be no question that the person is going to come in and direct the investment as the investor. If we do 2 investors, that can be done as well. Then each investor needs to own at least 50-50, okay? And we can do 2 investors in one business enterprise, each owning 50-50, each investing their own capital, and each creating their own jobs, meaning own jobs for the people that they're going to hire. My recommendation as to how many jobs, it's going to be usually 2 jobs minimum per investor. Okay, so that's going to be my recommendation, at least 2 jobs per investor. Again, substantial amount, immigration doesn't tell you the amount, but it's going to be the cost of investment compared to the total cost. They don't want loans secured on the business. Now, you can have, and we've had this before, somebody can lend you borrow money secured on your own personal assets. You can have a house that you refinance and cash out and use that for the investment, no problem. You can have a gift from your parents, from your grandparents, from your girlfriend, whoever, no problem. As long as we can document that, you can use that money. What you cannot do is to basically have a loan secured on the business, encumbering the business assets, because then immigration says that your money's not at risk, okay? Let me see, I see some questions over here. All right, I was under a property management category. Yes, you were, Jack, you were in the property management category. Uruguay doesn't have a treaty, sorry. Is Peru a treaty country? No, it's not. I wish they were. I'm Peruvian. I would have so many clients. No, they're not. Hopefully one day. Somebody else is asking, so if someone opens up a property management company, how much would the investment amount be? Does paying employee salaries count towards the amount invested in the business? Okay. So yeah, you can open up a property management company. I have clients that have done it with as little as 50,000, 60,000, because you're managing property for others as long as you comply with everything. And yes, the salaries that you have paid count towards the investment as long as they have been paid before we apply. right? So the business plan gets prepared and it's going to show all of the amount invested by saying this was paid, this was paid, this was paid. And as long as it was paid before we apply, then it's going to count towards investment. I have clients that have paid rent up to 1 year, 2 years up front because they didn't know what else to invest in because it was like a consulting type businesses, and that counted towards the investment. I have clients, again, in consulting type businesses where they really don't need inventory, they don't need a lot of equipment, and they're like, Romy, what do I do? So I'm like, well, we need to show money invested, so why don't you just buy the office? Because if you buy the office in the name of the company, that's money invested, and that can count towards your E2 visa investment amount. Okay, somebody's asking me, how can employees qualify in the same investment and get a visa? So the way that it works for an E2 visa is that you can come in as an investor, or you could also come in as an employee. Okay, so I actually had a case where the owner of the company was Argentinian national, and they didn't want to come in themselves, but they wanted to bring somebody over that they trusted to manage the company. So then that person came in as an employee of that company under an E2 visa. The requirements to come in as an employee is that first, the US company, it's owned by a company that has another company, by the foreigners that have the nationality of that same country that the employee is coming from. So if the company in the US is Argentinian, owned by Argentinians, then the employee that comes in needs to be Argentinian. If the company is owned by Colombians, then the employee that comes in needs to be Colombian. We also have to show that the person that's come in has some experience, high experience, I would say, related to the business they're going to be doing. Because even though you don't have to do a labor certification, publish an ad, try to hire somebody here that does it, but you still have to show to immigration why this employee, what experience is it that they have that it makes them so important for this type of business. So you still have to do that. Okay. Somebody else is asking me, can any visa program help with avoiding FIRPTA when transacting with real estate? For example, selling one property for an upgrade of another in the same jurisdiction. Okay, so FIRPTA is a withholding that happens with foreigners own real estate in the United States, either through their own individual name or through a single member LLC, that's disregarded entity. But the way to avoid FIRPTA, that withholding at the title company level, is you can form sometimes an LLC with more than one foreigner. So then that's no longer subject to FIRPTA at the title company level, or you can create a single member LLC that is taxed as a corporation. Then you don't have FIRPTA at the title company level withholding. We will keep on going. I'll keep on coming back. Whenever they kick me out, I'll be back again. All right, so let me keep on answering your questions. 1 second. Oh, yes. Can a foreign investor invest in an existing established S Corp and apply for EB1? Let's say they get 51% share of the company. Okay, so let's try to put that in context. First of all, one of the requirements to classify as an S Corp is that you're not foreign owned. So my understanding, and I'm not a CPA or a tax attorney, but I am married to one, is you cannot own, as a foreigner, you cannot own an S Corp, corporate relationship with a company in the United States, and that you're working for at least 1 year in the company in the United States. And then you can apply for EB1 and residency. So again, EB1 is a residency part of it. And the requirement is that you work abroad for 1 year out of the past 3 years for a company that has a corporate relationship to the US company. And then you were sent to the US company, right, to work, and you have worked for 1 year out of the past 3 years, and then we can do EB1. You do not need to have any ownership in the company. Okay, somebody's asking me if the option for Peru, it's only the L1 visa. It's the L1 visa, it's an investment visa, but we also have the EB5 investment visa, which I'm gonna discuss in just a minute. Somebody else is asking me, I have a client from Ecuador, what kind of visa can you do? What property or business to buy? So your client from Ecuador can either apply for an L1 visa that we discussed before, or we can do an EB5 visa, which we'll be discussing in a minute. All right, Sam wants to clarify. To clarify more, say the existing company issues 51 shares and grants them to a foreign investor, investing 125,000. Okay, so that you could probably do an E2 visa, Sam, because for an E2 visa, we want to show that the foreign investor owns at least 51% of the company, and an investment of $125,000 would be enough, depending if the business, that's what it requires. And they can apply for an E2 visa, assuming they are from a country that has a treaty with the United States. So if that is the case, yes, Sam, they can apply for an E2 visa. They can buy into an existing business. Another question, please read that this is an existing S Corp in the US and owned by a US citizen. Okay, so regarding the S Corp thing, again, my understanding is the foreigners cannot own S Corp. So when they buy into the corporation, that S Corp may lose its S Corp tax status. S Corp is not a different type of corporation. It's just a classification on tax. When we form corporations, they're all C corporations. Then you have to make an election to become an S Corp. And to be and continue to be an S Corp, you have to follow certain things, such as if you're working for it, you have to obtain a reasonable salary. You cannot have more than 100 shareholders, or shareholders need to have the same type of rights. So you cannot have different types of shares, and you cannot be foreign owned too. So in order to comply and keep your S Corp status, you have to follow all those things. So that's why I don't think in your example it would work, so long as a foreigner understands that they will lose the S Corp status, and so would the US citizen. Okay, C Corp, yes, no problem. LLC, no problem. It's just the S Corp that we have a little bit of an issue, a tax issue, not an immigration issue, a tax issue. Okay, so investment. So what is investment for immigration purposes? In most of these visas, we're going to form a US company. Then the investor is going to go and open up a US bank account for that US company. And then money is going to come to that US bank account to be used for the business. That's not investment. Money in the bank account is not investment. It's not until the money is actually used, meaning being put to purchase the business, buy assets, buy the inventory, pay the employees, pay things, pay vendors, that it's not actually invested. So yes, the money will come to the bank account, but it has to be used towards the investment by paying any of these things that I mentioned. Again, capital must be subject to loss if investment fails. What does that mean? You cannot have loans that are secured in the business, because then it's not subject to loss because it's somebody else's funds secured on the business. The treaty investor must prove that the funds were not obtained from criminal activity. You cannot, do bad things and then get the money from that. We have to show lawful source of funds. Where did you get the money? And then the investment enterprise cannot be marginal, right? So it must possess the potential to generate more than enough profit to provide for the living expenses of the investor and their family. If the business is only sufficient to give the investor and their family a happy life, immigration doesn't want that. They want you to create jobs. That's why I'm really adamant that we create at least 2 jobs or more for any E2 visa application that we present. And jobs for immigration means on payroll, not independent contractors. We like to see people on payroll. The length of stay, it's going to depend in the country that you're from. For example, Argentina gets 5 years, Mexico gets 4 years, right? Colombia gets 5 years, Costa Rica gets 5 years. And then you can renew this indefinitely. As long as the business is going forward, you can keep on renewing your E2 visa. If you want to do it in the United States, we can do something called change of status. A lot of people have done that recently because the embassies or the consulates were super delayed because of COVID. If we do a change of status, that means that you will change from your status, let's say tourist visa or student visa, to the E2 status. It's not a visa. That means that you only have the status while you are in the United States. The moment that you leave, you will lose that status. And you will only get 2 years. However, you can keep on renewing that status for 2 years. What some of my clients have been doing is they come in, they buy the business, we do a change of status, they get the status for 2 years, then we still apply at the consulate, but in some consulates are taking about 6 months to a year to give an appointment. They're already here in the United States, they already got their social to be able to work for their business and their spouse to go work for somebody else and their kids to be able to go to school while they await the interview at the consulate, where they will go and actually get the actual visa on their passport that would allow them to come in and out. So some of our clients have been doing that change of status to later apply for the visa. They don't have to, they can go straight for the visa, but they just need to wait outside of the United States until that visa gets adjudicated. Okay, so why would somebody choose an E2 visa? Well, maybe they want their spouse to work, be able to work here. I have obtained that. For example, I remember a recent case. It was the spouse was a doctor abroad, and so the husband came in, established the E2 business, so that their spouse can take the different exams that are required to revalidate your, basically for you to be a doctor here. I have a lot of people that are in the same situation. The spouse is the main investor, but then the other spouse is able to either go to school here or get a job. And if they're able to get a job, then that job can do labor certification and help them obtain, a green card for them and their whole family. Also, people on E2 visas can also, them or their spouse can do something called national interest waiver visa, which is to show that you have a certain amount of experience, that you have been published, that you basically would bring a benefit to the society here in the United States, that we shouldn't ask for labor certification, that you should just be able to become a resident. It's a harder case to prove, but it has been done. So, not everybody wants to be also here permanently. I have people that come here on an E2 visa and they just simply want to be here temporarily while the kids go to school here and then they plan to go back to their country. Or the situation in their country is not so great right now. They just want to come here, generate income, be able to work here, and then they want to go back to their country. So I have all those different scenarios. Let me see if I have any questions. Okay, so they're asking me here. Okay, let's start. One more question. If I bought a few Airbnb properties secured by mortgages, does the cash down count towards the amount invested at risk? Can I then manage them? And would this be enough to prove that I have a property management company? Also, how many employees would I need to have? So if you are buying property with mortgages, that doesn't count as investment. You need to invest in your management company outside of that with a separate company. I would recommend at least 2 employees. Next question. Can anyone already living here undocumented apply for any of these visas? I'm extremely sorry, but we're not able to help with that because for the E2 visa, the L1 visa, and the EB5, you have to be here lawfully. Can the purchase of a business, 50% cash and 50%, finance, count towards it? No, because they want you to invest all of it in cash. You cannot have a loan secured on the business. Can the applicant get a Social Security and work somewhere else? The main investor has to work for that company. The spouse can go work for wherever he or she wants. So if the plan is for the person to work somewhere else, then don't have them be the main investor. Otherwise, they can only legally work for the business that they invested on. All right, so the visa I'm going to talk about is called the EB5 visa. The purpose of this visa is to stimulate the U.S. economy through job creation and capital investment by foreign investors. This is an immigrant visa. So you are applying for this because you want to be and reside here permanently. There's 2 ways to do this visa. One is the direct way, which works very similarly to the other visas where the investor comes in, starts a business from scratch, creates 10 full-time jobs, and is actively involved in the management of the business. The other way is through a regional center. Regional centers are private companies, they're not the government, okay, that have received a designation from immigration to be able to receive foreign money or money from foreigners and then to give it to different projects that have been approved by them, right? So this is more like you're lending your money, but of course it's for a very low interest rate and you don't have to be actively involved in the business and you also don't have to worry about the job creation. What are the investment requirements? Well, generally it's a minimum of $1.05 million, right? So you need to invest $1.05 million, unless it's an area of targeted employment or a rural area. If you have any of those 2, then the investment amount is $800,000. The job creation, it's at least 10 full-time jobs. They don't have to be professionals, but they have to work at least 35 hours. This is if you're doing your EB5 with direct investment. If you're doing it through a regional center, then they will work together with the project to show the job creation and you don't have to worry about it. The job creation doesn't have to be shown until after your EB5 visa is approved. Okay, so that's the great thing. What we have to do in order to apply is show that the investment was made, either the $1.05 million or the $800,000. You can do $800,000 investment if it's a rural area, which is any area outside a metropolitan statistical area or outside the boundary of any city or town having a population of 20,000 or more, or if it's an area of high unemployment. meaning an area experiencing unemployment of at least 150,000 of the national average rate. So if you have any of those areas, the investment amount is going to be 800,000. Length of stay. Well, when you apply for an EB-5 visa, you're going to get a conditional green card for 2 years. Okay, so as soon as you do the investment, we can apply. And we're going to show a business plan if you're doing it on your own, or if you're going to show the documents from the project if you're doing it through a project. And they're going to give you a conditional green card, which is good for 2 years. In order to remove those conditions, we have to show immigration that the jobs were created. If you're doing it direct, you have to show that your 10 jobs were created. If you're doing it through a regional center, we have to show that the project went forward and that the jobs were created. If we're able to show that, then we remove the conditions. Now you have a permanent green card, and then you can apply for citizenship, and it no longer depends on the business. Now, don't think just because you got your green card, the project's going to give you your money back. It doesn't work that way. You really need to read the investment documents to see what you're signing up for, right? Because I'm your immigration lawyer. I can tell you what the immigration components are. I can tell you whether a project is qualified and whether the regional center is qualified, but I cannot tell you whether it's a good investment or not. You need a financial advisor for that. So it's so important to read those documents to see when you would get your money back. All right, well, that is our contact information. That's my team and I. I have really enjoyed today's presentation and all your questions. They're really interesting. Here, if you have any more questions, let's see. Is there an amount of the investment real estate in order to apply for an EB-5 visa? Well, you need to invest at least $1,050,000. So that money needs to be invested. So let's say that you are doing a development of townhouses. You need to invest in buying the plot of land, and you need to invest in the development at least $1,050,000, and then we can apply. And you need to create 10 full-time jobs, right? They can be all construction workers, that's fine. They need to be full-time on payroll, working at least 35 hours a week. If you have that, then yes, we can do it. Let's see if I have more questions. Does purchasing a hotel in Smallville, Colorado, for instance, for $800,000 qualify for EB-5? We have to show that the hotel was basically in a negative position and that you saved 10 jobs. So it's a more difficult analysis. So we would have to do a little bit of due diligence on the hotel to see if it would qualify for an EB-5 visa. How much are your legal fees for the EB-5 visa? So I don't know when people are going to see this recording. I cannot tell you my legal fees online, but if you email me, I'll be glad to tell you all of my fees. I do charge flat fee for the E2, for the EB1, for the L1, and for the EB5. So let me know, reach out to me, and I'll be glad to answer that. Is there a way to get a green card for the E2? Not directly, but what some of my clients have done is, let's say that they started buying a store for $200,000, and they created 3 jobs, right? Now later they develop more stores so that they reach the investment amount of $1,050,000, and they create more jobs. As soon as they reach the investment amount of $1,050,000, I can apply for the EB-5. And then as soon as we create the more jobs, and as long as 2 years have passed, we can remove those conditions. So while it's not a direct way, I have a lot of clients that have done E2 and then eventually changed it to EB-5, which is residency, by showing that they invested more and showing the job creation. Can you recommend some regional centers? So there are a lot of projects out there. I don't particularly recommend any of them. What I do is look at the projects, bring them over with the client. We will analyze each one of them, and then we'll let the client make the decision together with their financial advisor that tells them what their return on investment is going to be, what the risk is. You know, and I will look at the fact whether or not they're qualified for immigration purposes. So that's why I don't recommend any of them, because I don't want to assume that liability, and neither should you, but you can introduce them and then have them with the right professionals to choose which one will work for them. Another question. So let's say that an investor funds an existing C Corp, wholesales widgets for $1,050,000, hires 10 full-time W-2 employees. He qualifies for a conditional green card. How soon can this happen? Typical timeline to get the conditional. Okay. So in order for me to analyze whether an existing business will qualify for an EB-5 visa, it's so important to see, for me, when was the business created. So if you send me that information, when was the business created? If they hire 10 full new people, that works. You know, if they invest $1,050,000, that works. But let's see when the business was created, because different regulations apply to when the business was created, before 1990, after 1990. So send me that, and then I can answer your question. Which type of visas, another question, which type of visas that you discuss would be the easiest based on minimum investment to obtain a visa? Okay, so there's no such thing as easy with immigration. In my experience, everything is complicated. However, the one that requires the less amount of investment and the less amount of employees, which would be easier for the client to use, would be an E2 visa. The situation is that not all countries qualify. They have to be of a treaty nationality. So if your client has a treaty nationality, and again, I'll send a follow-up email with a link to all of those, then the E2 visa may be the one that works for them if they don't want to hire many employees and they want to invest, you know, as little as possible. That might be the visa for them. Okay, so let's do something, guys. Thank you for all your questions. Please email me if you need any further clarification, if anything about specific scenarios, anything about pricing, and I will, you know, love to help you. Thank you so much for being with me today. It has really been a pleasure. Again, my name is Romy Jurado. I'm an attorney in the state of Florida, but immigration is all over the United States, so we can help them in any state for real estate, probate, estate planning, and business law and litigation. Yes, only in the state of Florida. I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you for your time. I wish you all the best.